Welcome to the Freelance Journalism Podcast. I'm Catherine Reynolds Lewis with a very exciting episode that was recorded live and brings producer Anne-Marie Awad out from behind the mic and video to host our podcast today. So what was the experience like for you of recording live, and what do you think the Pitch Fest gives our listeners and viewers that other formats don't?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I got to take a field trip to Chicago, and it was great being a part of the SEJ conference. And yeah, I mean, I think I've never actually been a part of one of these events in person, where everybody kind of steps up to the plate, so to speak. And so I think like corresponding with our pitchers in the run-up, talking to them about their ideas, and then hearing them in action and really like hearing these super thoughtful, really nuanced questions from the editors, I think was so instructive. Like, I feel like I walked away learning a lot.
It is that classic journalism show don't tell that we learn so much more from than this theoretical pitch guide. So hope that all of you also enjoyed this episode.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. My name is Anne-Marie Awad. I am the editorial director for the Institute for Independent Journalists. Our mission is the emotional and financial sustainability of freelance journalists, particularly freelance journalists of color. And this is Pitch Fest. Come on. There we go. All right, this afternoon we've invited a handful of brave journalists to pitch their next great story idea to this amazing panel of editors. We did this because it can often feel like successfully pitching a story is some kind of like dark art or, in the very least, a well-kept secret. But it shouldn't be a secret, right? We want to break down barriers for freelance journalists and make this whole process a lot more transparent. So not only will each of these people get feedback on strengthening your pitch, but all of you in the audience will get to listen and learn a thing or two. Before I introduce you to our panel of editors, I want to explain how this is going to work. So I will invite each of our pitchers up here. I'll tell you a little bit about them on their way up. And then they'll each get a few minutes to present their pitch to this panel and answer any follow-up questions from our editors. Pitchers, I will be nice. I'm not going to run a timer while you're speaking, but I will let you know if you're going long and you need to wrap it up, okay? But I'll say it much nicer than that. I'll be like, please wrap it up, like a gift. Now I want to introduce you to our editors. Down at the far end, Bryce Cracknell is a writer, filmmaker, and journalist who is the founder and editor-in-chief of the award-winning environmental justice publication, The Margin. The Margin produces long-form, investigative, and data-driven reporting on environmental and climate justice in the United States. I didn't do this in order of how you're sitting, so I'm sorry. Michael Kodas is the senior editor at Inside Climate News and author of the books Mega Fire, The Race to Extinguish a Deadly Epidemic of Flame, and High Crimes, The Fate of Everest in an Age of Greed. Michelle Rowan runs an environmental team at the Chicago Tribune. Their mission is to raise awareness in Chicago and in the entire Great Lakes region about how climate change, pollution, energy, and ecology shape daily life. Jenny Splitter is the editor-in-chief of Sentient, a nonprofit, nonpartisan news outlet reporting on the impacts of factory farms and alternatives to the status quo. And finally, last but not least, Peter Prengaman is the global climate and environmental news director for the Associated Press, leading a team around the world dedicated to stories about climate change, from the impact on people and policy debates to green technologies. Let's give them a hand. All right. Before we jump into pitching, every freelancer has to ask a few very important questions before they pitch any outlet. And so I will play the role of the freelancer here and ask each of you to give us a little bit more information about what you oversee at your respective outlets, what kind of rates you pay, and anything else that freelancers should know. So Peter, I'm going to start with you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Peter Prengaman, as she said, and we cover a wide range of topics on our climate and environment team, everything from extreme weather and impacts to things that are happening in the news. We're always trying to connect, like what is happening with climate and environment, the latest being Iran and all the energy stuff. And we cover green energy transition, we cover solutions, we cover policy, all kinds of stuff. We are a team that focuses a lot on visuals, so that's a good transition to talk about the freelancers a lot of times that we hire. We predominantly hire freelancers VJs and photographers, although sometimes we do hire freelancers for stories. And what we pay really ranges from, we'll say, $200 a day if it's just a spot story and somebody's feeding notes, to $1,000 a day if you're a VJ in a very expensive market like New York or Los Angeles. The pay rates really just depend on where you are and what you're doing, and of course what you can negotiate. And what you can negotiate really depends on the relationship that you've built with the editors and the organization that you're talking to.
Small nonprofit newsroom, maybe a little bit bigger than it was a few years ago.
Inside Climate News.
Inside Climate News. So all of the editors wear a lot of hats. I oversee our coverage of the West. I oversee our photo and video operations, international freelance, since I have done a lot on wildfire and the Arctic and Antarctica, a lot of that coverage, a good deal of the climate science. As far as rates go, we generally start, if it's a story that you can report entirely from your desk with a telephone, then we've kind of settled a floor of about $650 for a story. I do try to bump things up a little bit from that, but we pay by the story, not by the word. And those can rise up to maybe $1,500 to $2,000 for a big project story that requires travel and being somewhere where you're going to be away from home for several days, or have a more arduous assignment in front of you. I can sometimes bump rates up if you're, like me, a writer and a photographer, because I oversee both of those budgets, and hopefully nobody from my outlet is watching this, so I can say that they don't necessarily look at both of those pools at the same time, so I'll pay separately for photos if the photos are fairly good. And if you're a writer that's just making a decent portrait with a cell phone of somebody you're interviewing for the story, I can bump you up, $25 or $50 for that. But sometimes, you're taking professional gear out, or drones or things like that. And usually I can get up to maybe, $200 or $250 for a photo. I'll usually pay a day rate of somewhere between $400 and $500, with the licensing fee for imagery included in that, if I'm actually hiring you as a photographer to work the whole day. And I just try to emphasize to folks that we can't pay like a lot of the bigger outlets pay, but we have an incredibly skilled, really great set of editors and a very collegial newsroom. So the process is pretty painless and pretty fast. And we really try to get stories published quickly and get our freelancers paid quickly. And with a lot of the freelancers who work for me regularly, that helps offset the rates that are lower and just can't compete with other outlets.
Great. Michelle, Rowan.
Hi. So I'm at the Tribune, which is a bigger publication, but these days our staff is pretty stripped down. A lot of us do multiple jobs as well. I run the environment team. That's my main focus, but I also work some days on breaking news. I coordinate the intern program. So we are always looking for ways to supplement our staff. I have a team of 2 full-time reporters. One is an investigative reporter who does more deeper dive things on pollution. My other reporter covers climate change, Lake Michigan, and just about any environmental issue that might come up that we want to prioritize. To supplement that, I bring on interns and freelancers as much as I possibly can. It just varies. As part of the equation is actually if we have enough editors to handle the stories as well. But our pay is not so hot either. If it's a daily story, we would probably start at $300. For a little more in-depth story, it could be $400, $500. If we have a long time relationship with you, then we can talk about bumping it up. But for the most part, it's in the $300 to $500 range.
All right. Jenny Splitter.
So Sentient is also a small nonprofit newsroom. I guess just to start, so we report on the impacts of factory farming. So that's really industrial animal ag. Also industrial fishing and aquaculture is in the mix too. Some biodiversity stories if, ag is a driver of the impact there. We do work with freelancers regularly, and the floor is at $400, but if we work with you regularly, we bump it up. We also try to keep, if it's $400, or either way, like to keep it kind of as quick as possible, publish the stories quickly, and pay you quickly. We're pretty good about that.
We love hearing that.
Yes, but that is like the one thing I could always, even from the beginning, when the rates were even lower than that, I could at least say like, we're going to pay you very quickly, which is nice. So, and then we do, like I think they're obviously the rates can go up if it's a longer project, and when we're working with you regularly, and we do video versions of stories, like reporters recording a video version of your story. We pay you for that. I was going to say something else around the photographs. I guess just in general, like when you pitch us, if you let us know if it's on the ground reporting, like things like that, and if you can get kind of a quick on the ground visual or audio record, anything like that, we can then that helps me negotiate for a higher rate, basically, or justify a higher rate. Who would I be negotiating with myself? It's my budget. I don't know what I'm talking about, but then I can justify it because it's like we're getting a lot of content in that one story. So
I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Jenny was on an episode of the Freelance Journalism podcast, which we produced a few months ago, and she went a lot more in depth about kinds of stories they're looking for and some examples of successful freelance stories for Sentient. So definitely check that out. And Bryce.
Hey, y'all. Thank you so much for being here. The margin is probably the smallest of the newsrooms on the stage. There are 4 dedicated staff, including myself, a managing editor, a producer, and an audience engagement manager who's here today, De'Ara Towns. We are an all-Black newsroom. We exclusively work with freelancers across the country, and we report long-form investigative and data-driven stories on environmental and climate justice. We use justice pretty broadly. It can include immigration, it can include mass incarceration, it can include many other issues impacting communities of color, Black, Indigenous, Brown, poor, and working class communities on the front lines of these issues. We have an average of roughly $1 a word, up to about 5,000 words. Typically, our stories are a minimum, usually of about 4,000 words. For our photojournalists, for like a 1 or 2 day shoot, our minimums are around $700 a day. If they're longer days, then we'll decrease that, but obviously that will depend. But yeah, we want to pay everyone a fair rate. We want you all to do your best work with us. A lot of our work has been recognized for awards, and it often moves the needle. That's why we choose to do this work. And so very excited to be here and to hear some of the pitches.
All right. That is some really important info, which means now we can get to the pitches. I'm going to call up our first pitcher, our first brave soul, Kartika Gupta. Kartika is Chicago-based. She's a photographer and freelance journalist with over a decade of experience and bylines in Nat Geo, BBC Travel, Vogue, Travel and Leisure, and Backpacker. Is this on?
Thanks so much for having me. This is quite exciting, but also a little intimidating. I wasn't expecting to be on stage. But my story actually is about will AI replace human-centered conservation, especially in Africa? And the story kind of derived out of a trip that I had last year reporting on something else. I was in Loisaba Conservancy in northern Kenya, and I had a chance to visit with the rangers. And in the past, these rangers have used handheld radios, just on the ground field tracking for their conservation efforts. But when I went there, their whole control room almost reminded me of some really high-tech company. They had huge monitors and TVs, and they were monitoring live in real time all the animals in the conservancy, as well as the vehicles and the people. And so that was really fascinating because they were using Earth Ranger, which is an AI platform. It's an open source AI platform from the Allen Institute. And they were using this to not only do conservation, but also kind of restrict or limit human-animal conflicts, because they could track and they could see where the lions were or where the elephants were, and where the safari vehicles were. And they also kind of help with the Samburu and the Maasai that live around the area, so to proactively prevent human-animal conflicts. So that got me thinking, and I did a little bit more research, and it's not just in Loisaba. Even in Serengeti, they use herd tracker to predict wildebeest migration, and in South Africa, they use Swarovski binoculars that identify birds real time. So with all this data analytics and AI, how is it going to help, or is it helping? And on the flip side, how is this going to impact or affect centuries of human-based conservation that these people essentially have spent their whole lives in, right? This is pastoral communities. These are rangers who rely on gut instinct. They know animal behavior. So I wanted to write a story on sort of the dichotomy of these two, the tech aspect of it, as well as the human-centered conservation aspect. And I am a photographer as well, a published photographer, so I have photos for this piece. When I was there, they also introduced white rhinos. I got to sit on the container and actually kind of see them being released. So it was an incredible experience. So I have visuals and videos, and I have preliminary interviews as well with the rangers and some of the people.
All right, I'm going to go first to Michael. What do you think about the story?
Okay, so I've got a couple of questions. Actually, a question to both points that you were making. And the first one is, we're not really talking about AI necessarily supplanting human rangers, because somebody's still got to go out and intervene with the poachers, right? Somebody's got to go and do that. That we don't have robots doing that quite yet, I don't think. So it does seem like there's an interesting story to be done on how is AI and how is technology changing the intervention into poaching. The bigger question I've got, because I've worked on a similar story maybe 15 years ago when drones were first getting introduced into this type of work, is what are the poachers doing? Because when drones were being introduced in Africa to start to mitigate poaching, what we discovered, the reporter I was working with discovered, is actually the poachers were way ahead of the rangers in the use of drones to find animals to poach. And the researchers that were starting to use drones said we're actually a couple of years behind what the poachers are doing. So what are the poachers doing with AI? And what are they doing with all of this technology? And I would be more interested in a story that is looking at how AI is changing this constant race of both sides of this using technology. How poachers and for those of you that have followed this, and I'm sure you know this, the money behind poaching is really, really substantial. And in the past, what we've discovered is actually the poachers are much better funded than the rangers that are trying to stop the poachers. So I would be really interested to learn if that money is going into technologies and actually the poachers are better gunned with technology than the rangers are. And I'd be very interested in a story that's looking at both sides. That's asking you to actually do some research that's a little more difficult than being with the rangers. But that would be the two thoughts. I find the issue really interesting and really pressing. We do have climate in the title of my publication, but we do define climate very, very broadly. I think we can find the climate angle, but I'd really be curious I'd really want to see a story that looked at both sides of the kind of ongoing and escalating battle between poachers and the people trying to stop poachers.
Can I chime in? So just to build a little bit on what you were saying, I think you asked this interesting question in your pitch, like kind of what's lost, for the people who do this. And I think that's interesting, but I would reframe that a little bit to ask the question of like, what can't AI do? Like, what are the human pieces of this that are still important? I think that would be really interesting. And then just to add a little bit of what Michael said about this, I would also say, has this worked? Like, and not just from the side of the rangers, but again, larger organizations that maybe track some of this stuff. Like, have all these tools really helped reduce poaching, or not? So those are some questions that jumped out at me.
And yeah, to your point, I think when I was there, they did have some stats on, because they've been tracking it for a few years, and so they did have some stats on, how has it impacted poaching. So I do have that. It's just I don't remember that off the top of my head. But
you can't get it. Don't worry about that.
All right, one last chance for any other editors who'd like to weigh in.
Well, just along the lines of what you were saying about, what people can't do. I guess I was curious if there's any efforts to like train I mean, it sounds like at this point, if it's really more drones than like, I guess it depends, like getting into the technology of it all. But is there any, it seems like with AI, there's a lot of efforts to make the AI better and, work with it. So I wondered if there were any efforts around that, around like training it with the, community wisdom or whatever. Or is that just like, I don't know. I just was curious about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I kind of touched on that when I was there, but they did have a lot of like predictive tools, and they were employing basically people from the surrounding areas to do a lot of this monitoring. And they still have rangers. I mean, because especially with white rhinos, they have to have visuals every 24 hours. So they do still have rangers on the ground, but it's just like supplementing it and making it more robust.
All right, Kartika, thank you so much. Give her a hand. Our next pitcher is Sarah Hashemi. Come on up. Sarah Hashemi is a science journalist covering environmental justice, climate, and the intersection between science and society. Her work has appeared in The Guardian, Popular Mechanics, Sierra, Sentient, and more.
Okay. This is like so much more official than I thought it would be.
Welcome to Pitch Fest.
Yeah, so I've been really interested in reporting on French overseas territories because I think there are places in the world that don't get a lot of attention. And specifically, I've been looking at the Western Indian Ocean, which is home to such a huge amount of biodiversity that is like underreported and understudied, but also under a huge threat. And so there's this French overseas territory called Réunion right off the coast of Madagascar, and it is home to some of the rarest birds in the world. They have these two endemic seabirds, the Barrow's petrel and the mascarene petrel, that are not found anywhere else, that are endangered. And specifically, the main threats are invasive species, habitat destruction, and light pollution is a huge problem on an urbanized island like Réunion. That is not the case around it, just because like it is so urban. It's a huge problem, and it's becoming worse. But there are people working to save these birds that are doing really cool work. There's a whole volunteer trained network of rescuers who save these grounded birds. And they have a yearly campaign against light pollution that has shown some success over the years. And I would like to highlight that work and highlight these efforts that are ongoing. I've spoken with people who work at the rescue center. I've spoken with researchers working in Réunion on seabirds, and I am bilingual, so that is an advantage that I have.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Jenny Splitter, what do you think about this one?
It's a topic I do not topic, but this, exact place I don't know much about. So this is interesting to me right off the bat. But so I had a couple of questions. In terms of like the habitat destruction and the invasive species, what do you know what are the like drivers of those, like both of those? And I guess like selfishly for Sentient, I'm like, is there an ag angle, or not even ag, but like industrial fishing or something like that?
Yeah. No ag angle came up when I was talking to researchers about this, but in terms of the invasive species, it's a lot of rats and cats that have been introduced on the island. So, there's like areas where they've managed to actually get rid of the rats and cats. The birds have come back. So that's like a sign that it works to do this, but it's really hard to control.
And then I guess my other well, I guess sort of comment question would be that like, it sounds like what you want to pitch is really a solution story.
Yes.
But then I think I would have like frame it around the solution. Like
Yeah.
what exactly is the solution? And what's working about it? Like what are the limitations? Because that's kind of where like the interesting, cool. Not that this is interesting. The problem is also interesting and important, and we do both kinds of reporting at Sentient. But just be cool to know some of those like more nitty gritty details around the different solutions. Like maybe the best one that you want to really report on.
Yeah, so the light pollution campaign has like gotten bigger and bigger over the years, and I think that's really cool. Like there's like this whole month of like nights without lights that has started as a really small thing, and now people like voluntarily participate in. And like there's like this big port where once they started participating, the groundings went down from like over 100 every year to like 20 grounded birds. So there are these places on the island where this is working, and it's kind of like it's also not just a problem here. It's a problem so many places where there are seabirds. So I feel like it's also a thing where you could like implement it elsewhere, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
And is it a nonprofit when you say a campaign or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's the Ornithological Society. Some of them, it's a lot of volunteers. They have a rescue center. So if like you see a grounded bird, you call the number and a volunteer will come if they can get the bird back to the ocean. Yeah.
Those are really cool details, I think, to include
Yeah.
in the pitch, because it's like, oh, like, what does it look like? And following someone for a day, that kind of stuff is really like fun details.
Michael Kodas, what do you think about this one?
Well, so I've got, just kind of a couple of questions, not to introduce conflict if there's not conflict there, but how many people are behind these efforts? I don't know if you're familiar with the idea of the big kill in New Zealand, but New Zealand was basically an entirely avian ecosystem before humans arrived, and they have efforts in various parts of the country and some of the smaller islands to kill off every single mammal that's not a human. And that's been very successful there now, but it took a long time for that to get some traction. There's always somebody who's in love with those feral cats or something like that. So I'd be really curious to know what the population that lives there feels about this effort that's kind of being introduced. And the same thing about the light pollution effort. We've seen lots of places that would like to have darker skies, and plenty of people that live there full time who have fairly legitimate reasons for not wanting to turn their lights out or dim their lights. And so I'd be really curious as to what the public that lives there feels about the efforts that are being made on behalf of the birds, and whether they feel as though this organization is kind of coming from afar and introducing change that they're not embracing, or whether some people support it and some people don't.
Yeah, I haven't spoken with people who aren't like researchers or activists, so I feel like that is something that I'm missing in my reporting right now. But the organization is based on the island. These are people who like live in Réunion and work on Réunion, so it's not like people from France doing this or something like that.
So, well, the final thing I'd say is just, it's really too bad we didn't recruit the great Jenny Bogo to be up here to give us the Audubon magazine perspective on this, because she would be fascinated by this.
Next year in Halifax. Last call. Any other editors have feedback for Sarah? All right. Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Up next is Eric Cassina. Eric Cassina is a Kenyan journalist and science communication specialist and a columnist with Business Daily Africa. His work focuses on climate action, food systems, and environmental governance, often grounded in the realities of rural Africa.
Thank you. So my name is Eric, and my story is on stone crushing in the Yatta Plateau. The Yatta Plateau is the longest lava flow in the world. It's a beautiful, beautiful place in Kenya, but there's a lot of stone crushing happening there. As a result of that lava flow, we have that fine black stone that is used for making ballast. And that's where investors are coming and degrading the environment as they get out that black stone, so they can use it for construction of roads and for buildings and all that. So the impact in the area is people's health has been affected because they just set up the crushers anyhow, and just next to homesteads. The farms around there are not as productive as they used to be, and that has affected people's health, livelihoods, and food security. So I'm gonna do a story that is going to expose all that and get the attention of the right people, so that the people that are living in the Yatta Plateau can get some justice, and also get back to productivity in terms of food security and health. Thank you.
I heard justice, so I want to go to Bryce Cracknell first for this one.
Yeah, thank you so much for raising this story. It sounds incredibly timely and important. The pitch that you shared, I think, is really strong. I'd also be curious to you shared a little bit about the history of the industry and what this material is used for. I'd also be curious to know more, just why this area, why this material. Of course, there's so many other building materials that we could be using. And so just getting a bit more of the industrial and geographic history, if you will, would be really interesting to just set the context for when this industry came in, how many generations has this impacted, and what does it mean to the health of people over time. The second piece that I'd be really curious about are what government agencies or what larger corporations or institutions, what kind of wrongdoing is happening on the accountability side? Who is supposed to be protecting or supporting folks who live in this area? It may not be anyone, but in theory, there probably should be. And so I'm curious what laws are being broken, what harm, more than what harm is being done, but who is inflicting the harm, and who is being left on the sidelines that should be perhaps enforcing some level of regulation to protect folks.
Now, I know we're not talking about the Great Lakes region, but I would like to give Michelle a chance to weigh in.
Yes, one of the things I was wondering about is the actual companies, because, and I was wondering, is this one big company, or is this a practice that lots of companies are doing? And who are these companies? Are they based in Kenya? Are they from overseas? I was wondering what kind of revenue we're talking about. And I was also wondering, do they pay these communities, to come in and do this? And if so, are there people that support it because of the income? So I wanted to know more about the business end of it and what it's bringing there. But and then I also wondered, are there any groups or efforts that are trying to work to close these policy gaps? Are there any activists or organizations that are trying to do something? And if so, what are those efforts? Oh, and I had one last thing. I was wondering, you had mentioned in your pitch that crops were failing.
Yeah.
And were you planning on talking to a scientist to explain how this dust is causing these crops to fail and why?
Yeah, definitely.
Because I think that's really interesting too.
Sure.
But thank you.
If I could add one more thing. I'd also be curious about the exports. And so this is obviously probably leaving Kenya for other countries, I would assume in the global north. And so if it's going to Europe or the United States, to what extent is there accountability on the part of the citizenship if there's people who are buying and using this material to build buildings that they probably take for granted and don't necessarily think about where it's coming from? I think there might be another opportunity for accountability to stretch that a little bit further, as this would cross boundaries and borders, to see this as a global story where there could be more accountability on the other side of the supply chain.
Just say just one more thing there. I think there's clearly harm happening, right? Yeah. Farmers and people breathing this in. But then I think to your point, and I think you mentioned this too, who are the people on the other side who might benefit from this, and is there tension there? And so all of that comes together, and I think often we try to frame stories of like trade-off. The trade-off is, the environment or progress, but a lot of times that's a false kind of premise, and maybe there's another way here. I mean, maybe in the end, your story shows that this kind of extraction, some of this can happen, but if there are regulatory agencies and this stuff is done in a better way, then there aren't the health impacts, So I guess I would just say, really go into it as you can with an open mind. There are people who are getting screwed, right? No doubt, but then there are probably people who are really benefiting. And if this area, and I don't know anything about this area of Kenya, but if it's particularly poor, right, people may be like, hey, no, these are jobs for us. All
right. Last call. Anything else? Okay. Eric, thank you so much. Give Eric a hand, please. All right. Our next pitcher is Sarah DeWeert. Come on up. Sarah DeWeert is a freelance science journalist based in Seattle. She's a 2024 recipient of the National Academies of Science Eric and Wendy Schmidt Award for Excellence in Science Communication. Her work covering biology, medicine, and the environment has appeared in publications including Anthropocene, Atmos, Biographic, Nature, and Nautilus.
Thank you so much. I would like to write a feature-length piece that asks the question, can we hack our brains to solve climate change? This is a question that is being posed by a small but growing group of researchers investigating the neuroscience of climate action. These researchers are using brain imaging, electroencephalography, other neuroscience techniques to understand the limitations of the human brain that make climate change such a difficult problem to solve, but also how we can sort of trick our brains into taking action. So this story sits at the intersection of two beats that I regularly cover. I write about climate change and human behavior for Anthropocene and for neuroscience, about neuroscience for the Transmitter. So what I plan to do is trace the history of this area of neuroscience over the last decade or so, introduce researchers to the scientists working in this area and how they're wrestling with the kind of philosophical implications of their research, detail the brain regions and functions that are emerging as the most important, and then discuss how their findings could be applied to improve climate policy and communication.
Bryce, I want to go to you again. What do you think about this pitch?
This is a really interesting pitch. I have mixed feelings. I think climate action, the communities that we cover on the front lines of environmental and climate justice don't have the time in their day to take additional action outside of just feeding their kids, taking care of their family, and so the question of like what neuroscientific things do we need to do to try and persuade folks who are more burdened by the climate crisis to take action doesn't sit with me. That's not what you were saying. But as I'm thinking about who we serve and like how we think about these issues, it doesn't necessarily fit there. I would be curious, however, when we speak to policymakers who have the ability to write legislature, enact change, what messaging would then help them get on the bandwagon and off of the petrochemical sort of broader industrial sort of process that we're in that's rooted in capitalism and colonialism to then shift? I think that would be particularly interesting, but as something that would be related to the general public and speaking out to them, I unfortunately think it perpetuates a lot of the issues that the climate movement and environmentalism has as being a sort of more sort of white, powerful, dominated space. And in fact, I would see how can we invert that and talk to folks with power to get them to do something different.
Peter, what do you think of this story?
Really interesting pitch. I'm always fascinated by things in the brain. But Bryce said something that I hadn't thought about, but I had thought about it, I think, in a different way. And that is that the way that you have this story framed is, can learning more about the brain basically help us solve climate change or solve climate change? And I guess what I would say, and I read your longer pitch as well when you have more details, is like we know how to solve climate change. Doing it is something different. And so I think you should think about the framing, because you're not really saying this is solve climate change. What you're talking about is brain imaging and knowledge of the brain that helps us overcome some of the barriers to making individual choices. But again, I come back to what you said, that's hard for me too, because we know to really move the ball on climate change, it's at a societal level, and that comes from policy, not individuals, and not dumping it on individuals. So I had that thought, and then I also just wondered about the practical, repercussions of this. Like, how do you use this, right? And then how do you overcome other human tendencies like greed and stuff like that? So it's like fascinating, but I find myself kind of coming back to it feels very academic and not actionable for somebody who's reading it. So,
any other editors want to weigh in?
I'll pipe in. So, reading this pitch, the thing that just immediately came to me is the comparison of what this is to geoengineering. I guess this is kind of maybe this is neuroengineering, and we've seen the getting to Peter's point, we know how to solve climate change, and so we find ways to manipulate the earth to come up with methods to not solve climate change that will allow us to have a high emission lifestyle. And so now we're thinking in terms of, okay, how do we manipulate our brains? If they're thinking in terms of tricking our brains, how many people who, much like the population that is so adamantly against this even concept of geoengineering would respond to that as, oh my God, now they're going to brainwash us to try to deal with climate change, and what kind of pushback would there be on the whole concept that this is, and I would be interested to learn that. That all of this said, and following up on Bryce and Peter, somewhere in here there's a pitch I would be interested in. I mean, this is in our wheelhouse, and fits with climate science that we like to cover. But I would be cautious about taking it if it was presented as something like a solution story. I think that there's a lot of challenging aspects to this concept that I think would have to be explored in the story.
I guess I love the reframe both of you have done. That makes me super interested. And I guess just for Sentient's purposes, thinking about dietary change, which is definitely, there's always going to be an individual household component, both there's the systems change and also individual change, especially we're talking about diets. And that kind of brings me to the immediate thing that I thought when I read this, which was I want to see read some examples, just to, in the abstract is kind of a fun science-y pitch to read, but yeah, just, an example of how this would work. And I think then maybe narrowing it with the example would help.
Just a quick follow on that, only because it's funny. But I did have a researcher comment to me once when folks were writing several years ago about the tick-borne disease that makes you allergic to meat. Yeah. About, oh boy, wouldn't it be great if we could figure out a way to spread that disease all over the place? That'd be a real climate solution, and you can imagine how the public would respond to that. And it kind of speaks to the concerns I would see about this research, just writing about the research side of it.
Thank you.
Sarah, thank you so much. Give Sarah a hand. I want to reiterate, it is so brave for all of you to come up here and pitch stories and receive feedback in front of a room full of people. Thank you again for making this happen. I want to bring up our last but not least pitcher, Michael Zagrafis. Michael is a Chicago-based writer with a background in journalism. His current work in copywriting focuses on content strategy and turning audience insight into clear and compelling stories.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you all as well for being here as well. So my story, in brief and short, is about the nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands post-World War II. So to start, we are currently in the process of finalizing a $960 billion defense budget for the 2026 fiscal year for the United States of America. And a huge portion of that budget is going to be allocated to a Golden Dome, which is essentially a missile defense system, or a very elaborate one in the Pacific Islands. And we have a huge history in the Pacific Islands. Very briefly, for those of you that do not know, we dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan in World War II, and we dropped 67 in the Marshall Islands post-World War II. From 1946 until 1958, we dropped 67 bombs testing this weapon, trying to figure out how we could be more efficient, so on and so forth. Long story short, one particular bomb detonation called the Cactus detonation created a divot, a crater, in one of the atolls in the Marshall Islands. And in the 1970s, United States servicemen took all of this radioactive waste from across the country, across from the Marshall Islands, and some from Nevada test site that we have here in the United States, and they buried all of this waste in this crater, and they put an iron dome on top of it. The issue with that was that it was supposed to be a temporary fix to the solution, and it is still as is to this day. So the issue is this concrete has cracked, and the seepage has been leaking into the lagoon, and they did not line the bottom portion of this crater that they initially have. So it's been seeking through the dirt along with just going out through sideways through the cracks. So there are many ways to take this story. Of course, you have the displacement of these people from the Marshall Islands, the justice side of it, which is a huge portion of, well, how they still haven't received correct compensation or reparations for what has happened to their people or to their community all these years since. You have the health aspects of it, how these people have had so many horrible health concerns and how their bloodlines still follow with this still to this day. You have the political aspect of it, how the implications influenced the Cold War throughout the 50s, for example. And what I wanted to talk about primarily here today is, of course, the environmental aspect of it. You have portions of these islands that where these testings took place, they are still uninhabitable, and they will continue to be uninhabitable for thousands of years. Food sources permanently tainted for forever. And on top of that, you have this interesting particular run-it dome that the United States is trying to distance themselves from and take no accountability for. So the main portion I wanted to talk about is because people know about this run-it dome. This is not news. This has existed for years, since the 70s. And people know that the leakage is happening. People know that this is dangerous. This is a ticking time bomb, but this has been acknowledged. The main fresh angle as to what matters today, why is this relevant today, aside of all the other angles that I've previously mentioned, is because there's this huge discrepancy between the United States and everybody else that is analyzing the run-it dome. In 2020 and 2024, the United States had 2 separate reports about the status of the run-it dome. Is it dangerous or is it safe? In both of these reports, the United States, through the DOE, which is the Department of Energy, currently under Chris Wright, they basically said, this is a problem 20 years from now. Right now, we're fine, we're safe, we don't really have to worry about this too much. We can kick this can down the road. The Marshall Islands, the Marshallese people, every university and every other independent journalist and scientist that has covered this has refuted these claims and believe that this is a very pressing problem today, not in 20 years from now. The caveat, or the coup de grace with this, is the fact that this is kind of highlighting a monopoly of information here. Because the United States is much more powerful than the Marshall Islands, and because they are a sovereign nation, but a freedom-associated state with the United States under a compact of free association agreement, the United States kind of is bullying them in a way. We are the United States. We have much more money than you. We have much more power than you, and you are kind of under our wing. So because they have the ability to do this, the United States can kind of unilaterally say, hey, our studies are what matters, and everything else that you may have doesn't really concern us that much. So through this environmental issue of this seepaging into the ocean, which is already affecting the Marshallese people more than it has for the past 50 years, you have this environmental issue that is now transforming into this scientific gatekeeping issue over this monopoly of the truth, proxy the DOE. And the relevancy of this is because why I think this is prescient now and today is because the United States has a foothold in the Pacific, in the Marshall Islands, obviously. We have military bases there. We have a great relationship with them. Great with a huge asterisk point because of my next point. The reason why we have this golden dome, or the aspirations for it, is to protect the United States in the Pacific, particularly from a huge adversary of ours, China. So China is trying to expand in the Pacific. They've convinced the Solomon Islands to have a security pact with them. they've convinced Naruti and Kiribati to have switched their position on Taiwan in terms of how they refer to them in diplomatic positions. And they've had undersea cables with Papua New Guinea. And they are also building data centers on their land. So the point is, China, for example, our huge adversary, is already trying to expand into the Pacific. This is not a hypothetical. They're trying to do it. And all of these countries, all of these sovereign nations are right next to the Marshall Islands, in between Australia and Hawaii and Micronesia. They're all right next to each other. So I think this is an incredibly interesting story because the United States is intentionally kicking the can down the road with their studies to delay remediation of this Run-It Dome. Their studies are saying, we don't need to worry about this now. We can worry about this in 20 years, which is actually what they say in their 2020 and most recently 2024 studies. Because they're doing this, the government in the Marshall Islands, this is sowing distrust with them. And they are trying to press the United States to make a move. Now, China has not done this yet with the Marshall Islands, but because they're expanding in the Pacific like they are, I don't think it's crazy to think that they may try to swoop in as the white knight and say, hey, we can help you in the way that the United States is not, and potentially not lose immediate stranglehold over this Pacific, but the United States failing to continuously match what the Marshall Islands have been asking them to do for years and years and years ultimately can be a problem. So I think this is a story about how the United States ultimately, awkwardly, may lose the Pacific because of a pile of concrete.
That's a big one. Why don't we start with Bryce? What do you think?
It is a big one. This is one well done. That was well told. And there's a number of angles here. And I think there's a couple of stories here, if not a few stories. Finding this sort of unique angle or intervention will be important. The U.S. government via the U.S. military is the largest polluter in human history. And they're rarely, if ever, held accountable for the pollution that they leave behind, whether it be in the continental U.S. or in its territories or anywhere else in the world for that matter. And we've done some reporting historically on that in the continental U.S., and so it's up our alley for sure. I'd be curious to know more about your relationship to this story, the U.S. Marshall Islands. I don't know whether you've been there or whether you know folks there or and whatnot. And so if you haven't, we would want to certainly find a local reporter to partner with you on such a thing, just to sort of share that lived experience and sort of really undergird the loss of food systems, the loss of sovereignty, the loss of relationship to the land, which I think is extremely important.
Sure.
To the extent of the sort of broader geopolitical situation, I think there's interesting narratives to sort of hint at with the sort of broader Iron Dome or whatever.
Golden
Dome, of course, with this administration. And with sort of China sort of expanding across the Pacific, I'd want to steer away from too much speculation as to certain aims of different governments and what they're doing. But I do think there is certainly a story here and one of accountability. I'd also be curious of what other reporting has happened in the space. It sounds like I would assume that there has been a significant amount of reporting. And I'd want to make sure that we are being additive and any sort of data mapping that the margin does well would sort of be able to move the needle in some way. We obviously do a lot of FOIA and stuff as well. And so I think there could be some really interesting, fascinating, investigative pieces to come out of such a story. And so there's a lot here and I think it's well done.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Michael Kodas, what do you think?
Well, I guess what I would say right off the bat is that this isn't a story; it's a book. There's just so much that you've presented here, but kind of following on what Bryce said. I mean the degradation of the concrete dome and the U.S. failure to deal with that has been covered quite a bit over the years and visited. I think at least the last one I read was in the Los Angeles Times. So you definitely want to see some way of looking at this differently or finding a new angle into this story that we think is going to resonate more with readers than what we've seen before. We don't want to, kind of rehash something that, hasn't, gotten traction in the past. The justice aspect of it, I think, is really, really compelling, but also one that we've repeatedly managed to ignore. So how do we pursue this story in a different way so that it's not so easy to ignore? The China angle is really interesting to me, but it's also at this point pretty speculative, and so that if it turned out that there was really something concrete that we could put into that would work. Sure. But I'd want it to be much more supported by documents and things that where we can really nail that down and really show that that's the case.
Sure. Briefly, if I may, I agree with you 100% in terms of like the content that's already out there regarding the Iron Dome. That's, to be honest, one of the reasons why I wanted to shy away from just reporting it. Like, we've seen pictures or videos, perhaps, and heard kind of testimonies. So I do think that the justice angle for these people is a little bit more salient, perhaps, though it does, again, of course, kind of get ignored. So trying to find a better way to do that is, of course, part of it. But that's ultimately kind of why I wanted to try to frame this in a more geopolitical aspect in terms of how this could potentially be viewed in the future. Because we all know, or I shouldn't say we all, but those in this space, I should say, are already privy to this information about what had happened and how it currently is. But thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. That kind of confirms what I thought.
You're clearly looking for a really, a good angle and one that's going to resonate, and that's super challenging. So I don't want it to seem as though I'm, critical of all that. I just want to point out, that, it's been really, really difficult in the past to, get a story on this that really resonates, and you're thinking of it from a lot of really good angles to try to find a way to make it resonate more. And that's, that's what you should be doing with this.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Peter Prengaman, I saw you taking lots of notes.
Yeah, so this is a fascinating one, and you presented kind of very different things than what you had in your pitch, in the write-ups, which is fine. So listening to all this, and I'm going to echo Bryce and Michael here a little bit, but I'm going to put it in a different way. Like, I think you have great context, you have great historical knowledge, great sort of, I think, maneuvering and comprehension of topics. But I think what you have to do is figure out like what stories you want to tell within that, because they're really all over the place. And maybe it's not just one story or two story. I mean, maybe it is really a series of stories, but is it a real focus on the people and, families of victims or people, who still have health issues today? Is it the discrepancies or disagreements about what has been looked at scientifically about how much of a risk this is? I think that could be an interesting frame of today. The geopolitical stuff is also interesting. I mean, some of this you could put in any one story. You could have some of this kind of context, but right now you have I'd say several books, right? I mean, it's just like there's so much information, which is awesome. It means you really know this, which is great. A lot of times you have the opposite problem when a reporter comes with a pitch. They have they have a great character or stuff, but they don't know the big picture.
Sure.
You know the big picture. So my suggestion is get on the ground. What's the granular?
Sure. Thank you.
All right, last call. Any other feedback? Michelle.
This is a very kind of small angle, but when I read your original pitch, I also thought it was a little different and was looking at how do you get America's attention, for this. So my thought along those lines was, who from the Marshall Islands lives here? Who came here because of what was going on there, emigrated, is there a place in the U.S. where there's a large population of people from the Marshall Islands? And does somebody have a compelling narrative there that could be an entry point for one of many stories, possibly?
I actually, to answer briefly, yes. In Arkansas, right by the Tyson chicken factory, there is a humongous population from people from the Marshall Islands. In the 40s and 50s, it was originally like Los Angeles and San Francisco, but over time, the majority of them emigrated to Arkansas, and that remains so to this day. And that, you're right. A few points. That was my initial plan, to kind of make this more relevant in the United States. But again, kind of what was previously mentioned, I thought that talking about this topic has been kind of done and it hasn't really gained a whole lot of traction. And I thought maybe something a little bit more fresh and interesting is kind of maybe what would break that mold. And I do absolutely agree that maybe reaching out or somehow having contact with this community would be very beneficial.
One final thought, following up on her, because I did, also notice that the pitch had changed, and for this idea that we continue to ignore within the United States what our nation did to this other country, we're also seeing this this big nuclear energy renaissance in the United States. You mentioned Chris Wright and the Department of Energy, and I wonder if all of the new concerns about new ways of generating nuclear power within this country. Mm-hmm. If somewhere in there is a news peg that can, be used to just pursue that one angle that you're talking about. Why is it that the United States continues to ignore this problem? And not, it's obviously not just the Marshall Islands, but that is, kind of the biggest of the kind of abandoned areas of nuclear testing. And so that, perhaps there's a way of pursuing it from that angle. That's kind of a little bit of an amorphous thought right now, but that was something that struck me when I first read the pitch.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Michael. To all of our brave pitchers, thank you so much. A big hand for them. This is not easy, like I said. I want to close out with our few remaining minutes and just advocate for those of you who are not lucky enough to be chosen to be a pitcher. It's a highly coveted position. Any other freelancers in the room who are interested in pitching each of your publications, can you share how to do so, how best to do so, and how to get in touch?
So a lot of people who work with AP have relationships with different editors and reporters. If you don't and you want to, run something by our team, you can start with me. My email is Prengaman at ap.org. And I'll be honest with you about what we can do and what we can't, and then maybe send you to somebody else on our team, or another editor or somebody else, a regional editor that maybe fits what you're looking at. But be in touch. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter.
We've got a form online where you can put all your biometric data and your fingerprints, and once you've done all that, then Michael.Kodas at InsideClimateNews.org, and although I have specific areas that I focus on, send me any pitch that you're interested in sending our way, and I can forward it to the appropriate editor for that particular topic. I'm also willing to email or even sometimes chat over the phone with folks that have a good idea, but need a little bit of help in crafting it into a pitch that would work for us. But we take a lot of freelance. I take a lot of freelance about the American West, and I'm always excited to see people's ideas and see good pitches.
All right, thank you.
You can also email me at mrowan@chicagotribune.com. We do like our stories to have some kind of, no matter how small it is, tie into the Midwest, but that's really the only limitation. I mainly just do environmental stories, but you can also send me other story ideas that I could forward along as well.
So if you go to sentientmedia.org, there's a Pitch Us page that kind of gives a whole lot of examples and what we're looking for. Our freelance contract is also on the site. If you have a pitch that's like kind of, far along, and send it to pitches@sentientmedia.org. That way it goes to all three of our editors, and then we put it into a pitch channel and we all discuss it to make sure we don't lose track of things. If you have a rough idea and you want to, chat it over with me, my email is jenny@sentientmedia.org, and, I'm happy, and just follow up if I miss it or something like that, because I'm always happy to kind of talk things out if it's kind of a loose pitch.
You can find our pitch page at the margin.us. We have a whole tab with our pitch guide, and you can email contact@themargin.us with the pitch, and we'll be getting back to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much to these amazing editors for their generosity in sharing all of this feedback. And thank you so much for joining us for Pitch Fest. You might be at a table that's got a QR code at it. If not, go find one. We would love for you to just scan it really quick and take a quick survey to let us know how we did. We're always looking for ways to improve. You can find us at theiij.com, where we have tons of resources for freelance journalists. This episode is being taped, this event is being taped for, it's not an episode yet. It will be an episode of the Freelance Journalism Podcast in a couple months, so please feel free to subscribe. My name is Anne-Marie Awad. Thank you again, and good night.
The Freelance Journalism Podcast is a production of the Institute for Independent Journalists. Our mission is the emotional and financial sustainability of freelancers of color. Learn more about our work at theiij.com and use the code POD10 for a discount on our annual conference and other events open for registration now. That's POD number 10. And please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, or both. You can find our free webinars and other offerings on YouTube. And your recommendation and sharing with friends is the greatest compliment and helps us discover new listeners. Thanks for listening.